Welcome, folks who I've been to other salons with, other folks I haven't seen. We'll get to know each other over the course of 8 sessions. I hope you'll come to each one. We'll see how good this one is, and then you can decide. But I'm very glad you're all here. I've been really looking forward to this. I expect we'll have like a couple more people trickle in as we go. So the idea for those of you who aren't familiar to Intellect is this is not like a lecture series. I'm not a classical literature professor or anything. I have no super special insight other than I have loved reading it, and then I've gone a little bit above and beyond what I expect most people will, to like read secondary literature and ask ChatGPT a bunch of questions and read it multiple times to try and make sure I understand what we're talking about. But really, I kind of view my role here as like a facilitator, like just to get us all talking and enjoying this together. And the reason I like Intellect more than I like, frankly, like in-person book club sometimes with friends is like there's some barrier to entry here, either in having a membership or a ticket. It's like you just find people who are actually excited about this from all over the world. And so it's just a great way to kind of bring people together who want to dive into a cool story together. So I've done a number of different salons, Trey and Marcus and Sue. That's my mom over there, and my brother Brendan joining. So it's a family affair always, doing this as well. This is something we like to do together. But basically what we'll do here is I'll kind of kick off, especially today, with a little bit more context so that we all kind of know what we're doing. And then eventually what I'll do is like I kind of keep a pocket of questions in case the conversation dies down to kind of to get it back started again and get us working through this. But this isn't like a super salon where someone wrote a book and they're gonna, I'm just gonna interview them and we're gonna ask a bunch of questions. Like this is very much meant to be something that we do and share together. So preferably, like most of you are on video. That's great if that works. It's okay if it doesn't, but just so that it's easy for people to identify you and know where you are. If you have something you want to say in a group like this, you can mostly just jump out, but also there's a raise hand feature here that works very well if you just want to like raise your hand because you want to jump in with something. Um, and with that, I think we'll just get started. But does anybody have any before we get started questions like inner intellect or just what to expect at the like a very high level before we even get to the Odyssey? Okay, pretty straightforward. We've all been on Zoom calls by now, right? Okay, so the Odyssey. The reason that I am hosting the salon is because my brother Brennan sent me a picture of a billboard in Los Angeles that said, was Christopher announcing Christopher Nolan's version of the Odyssey was coming out in a year. It's coming out in July, and he's like, "Well, we should read this together. Like the book's always better than the movie. Like it's kind of a gap in our knowledge. I hadn't read it since my early 20s. Brendan never read it. Like, well, these are like this is a foundational story in Western culture, Western literature. There's so many references. Like, if you haven't read it before, that you'll read this book and be like, oh, so that's where this come from. Like this is where this story like appears. And so we kind of was like, well, we should do this and read the book together. And the reason I decided to do it as a salon rather than just he and I reading it together and talking about it on the phone after we read the book is it's a big book. There's a lot going on. There's different things happening, and it's an oral tradition. Like this is a story that would be told orally, and so it just kind of seemed fitting to try and do this with a group of people where you're interacting with the story and kind of doing it rather than just sitting and reading it alone. And because the story is so rich, there's rooms for all kinds of different interpretations. There's room for all kinds of different things to jump out at people. Different people will, I think, be inspired by or find frustrating or enjoy different parts of the story. And so by doing it as a group of, we got 16 people here so far today, I think we'll get into the story deeper than frankly I could get into it reading it alone. And so I hope it'll be the same for all of you. It's just a fun place to come. We'll do once a month. I tried to break it into sections. So there's 24 books, essentially chapters in the Odyssey. So by breaking it into groups of four, they're kind of bound thematically in the groups of four the way the book is written, so that makes it like a nice way to read it, and it also keeps the reading light. So once a month, 75 pages. If you had to, you could probably slam that out in an hour or two before the event, or you can kind of read it piece by piece. Don't be afraid of reading ahead. Don't be afraid of any of that, but I just tried to make it easy enough so that this is like a Thursday night thing. You can kind of just lock into the calendar and know it's going to be a good time and hopefully a fun discussion. So the first thing to like kind of start with for me is like how many have read the Odyssey before? Like have you by show of hands, raise your hand if you've read it before. Okay, so this is great. Okay, a lot of people who haven't read it. So, um, of those of you who have read it, how many, raise your hand if you have read it recently enough that you remember the details or any details really, or is this like I read it in high school because I was forced to and I have really no recollection of what I read and that's why I'm here. I'm seeing Marcus nod that maybe that's where he's at. Okay, so is there anybody here who's like, I am just a huge fan of the Odyssey, and anytime anybody does anything, I show up because I love this book so much? Okay, I think that's where I'm headed. I think I'm gonna be like the person who gets dressed up like Frodo outside of like a Lord of the Rings showing, at midnight, and even though I've seen it 300 times, because the mythology of this book and stuff is uh, I think so rich and so exciting. Like you can read it over and over and over. Okay, well, this is really fun. Thank you for kind of expectation setting. Maybe one more is how many of you have read the introduction, had time to read the introduction, which is actually like the longest reading we'll have in the whole thing? Okay. Okay, pretty good, pretty good. Great start. Um, okay, so I would love then, given that this group is so new to the Odyssey, the thing that I have been most excited about and why I wanted to do an introduction as opposed to just jumping into the first four books is to get a sense of like why you're here. Like why pick up the Odyssey? And no one has to talk, but I will also like give every single person a chance to talk if the question's interesting. So we can kind of take our time. I'm happy to call on people if you want to raise your hand maybe is the best way to do it. Like if you want to jump in, go ahead and just use the raise the hand thing, or you raise your hand so I can call on you. But I really just kind of want to know, like starting out, like why this book? What compels you to be here and want to pick up a poem that's almost 3,000 years old? Mom.
Um, I love the song by the Band of Heathens, Odysseus. That's number one. And number two, um, it's just that you just hear the Odyssey all the time. And actually, it's funny because a year ago, I put it on my list of books to read. So when this came up, it was like, I just feel like I need to read this book. And that's it.
If you have not heard the Band of Heathens version of this, it is in the useful links that is in the that I put in the each one. It's a short little song, but it's like singing about it like he's a modern day cowboy. It's hilarious and kind of walks through the story. It cracks me up. Love that one too. Anybody else? Kimberly.
I walked into a bookstore and the young woman commented that it's Emily Wilson, really the way she's trying to translate this. The idea of trying to understand that we are in present time, but trying to capture it. And I appreciate her comparison to her other folks having done the translation. So, not having read it, I was really interested to see her presentation. And there's been a lot of talk about Emily Wilson, so I wanted to see, what it was about.
I love it. It is interesting. So for people who aren't maybe familiar with the story, there are many people who think this is the best translation. Christopher Nolan, that's why he's part of his inspiration for this movie. He said he liked this one best. Tyler Cowen, if you're into Tyler Cowen, he likes this translation. But it is very different than some of the earlier translations, which are much more flowery, much longer. One of the reasons I like the Emily Wilson translation is that she tried to keep to the exact number of lines in the original story. And so you get a little bit more, I think, poetic rhythm in a tighter story. Some people really don't like it because I think it misses things. But I think I really like it, and part of the reason we picked it is I think it is such a crisp telling of the story that it's kind of accessible and easy for anybody to get into. So, Kimberly, I'm glad that the Emily Wilson angle recruited you. And if you want also, just because this is such a big group, we don't have time for like proper introductions of like where you're from and everything. Otherwise, we'll be here all night. So if you just in the chat, you want to drop like, hey, I'm so and so. I'm Grant Mulligan from Golden, Colorado. And if you have like a Twitter handle or anything else where you want to be found or a Substack or something like that, you're welcome to include that as well so that we can do this. And then after this, I will work with Intellect to get a Discord channel. So anyone who's a member and has access to the Discord channel will be, you can share favorite passages or things like that in between sessions to kind of keep the conversation going. If you have any questions, it's a great place to drop that. But who else wants to go? What are other folks here? Go ahead, Colleen.
I recently read the Iliad with like a different book discussion group. And so it wasn't an Emily Wilson translation. It was Stanley Lombardo's translation, but it was still really good. And it was like pretty moving to me. And I had read excerpts from the Odyssey, I think, in college. So it's been a really long time since I've read the Odyssey, but the Iliad was so like I mean, I guess sort of emotionally and I don't know. I connected to it in a way that I didn't really expect to, and so that has made me want to read the Odyssey.
Tell us a little bit more. What captured you? What made it so
So
emotionally moving?
I mean, I also had read excerpts from the Iliad in college as well, and I really kind of remember like my memory of it is sort of like the main story, like there's a war and these two groups are fighting the war and kind of over a stupid reason, like somebody stole a girl.
The
And
most beautiful woman in all of recorded history. But
yeah, and like and sort of the gods were also sort of on different sides of the war. But this time when I read it, first of all, I found it fascinating just thinking about the degree to which like belief in the gods and thinking about the gods was just so much a part of every decision and everything that everyone did all the time, which I just found fascinating. But then there was also this scene from the Iliad, which was this like weird kind of scene that wasn't a battle scene between Hector and who is from Troy, and 'cause I don't know if people know, and his wife. When because it turns out that Paris is like a kind of like a doofus that doesn't realize it, like he doesn't even get that he started this horrible, ridiculous war, and everyone else is fighting it for him, and he just like I don't know, like decides he's not going to fight one day, and it's just so he's like kind of turned out to be like a hate. I don't know. I did not like him, and so Hector goes home to try to get Paris and bring him back out to fight the war that he started, and has this conversation with his wife about how his wife is basically saying, "Please don't fight this war. Please come back," and he's just like, "I can't do that. I can't abandon my men. I can't come home from the war. And even if we lose it, like I would rather die than know that I didn't, like, I don't know, fulfill my like duty to my men." And I don't know, the whole conversation, the scene just stuck with me in sort of a weird way. And yeah.
I
Oh,
love
and
that.
at the end of the scene, his son gets scared of him. His son is like one, and he tries to hug his son before he leaves. And his son sees him in his like battle helmet with the horsehair plumes and covered in blood and doesn't know who he is and like freaks out. I don't know, just as a parent, that it just, yeah.
I think this is the thing is like I go back to read these books I'm like, oh, so that's why it lasted 3,000 years. Like that's why people still read this. Like because it does. It can capture you that way. I love that. Who else wants to share why they're here? Paul.
Hey, I read a good chunk of it in college, but that was over 20 years ago, and so wanted to. It's been on my list for a while to read the whole thing, and then also at a kind of a different point in life. And then obviously kind of a added impetus with the movie coming out and wanting to complete it before that. So I just saw the email today and had last done Internet Select a few years ago, so signed up again and excited to join.
Oh, I love that. And I will say we timed this to be we will finish the book in June so that you can all go see the movie in July, and then the recap is after the movie comes out. So you have like a 2 week period after the movie comes out to when I scheduled the salon, hoping to catch people where we could be like, okay, real talk, like how did this movie compare? Let's and see what we think, and then you'd be prepared to go with your friends, be like, oh, the book's way better. You can be that person who's um, yeah doing that.
That's
Who
why
else?
I'm here, is to
Yeah.
make people feel less special than me when the movie comes out. Now, it's like you said, it's been around for 3,000 years, and I think there's some inherent value in connecting to the lineage of great works, and it's an obvious gap in my understanding of kind of that canon. And the movie I think creates a good impetus to do it. And then also I really like hanging out with you, so it felt like a good reason to do that. So overall, that was enough for me.
Glad you're here. Who else wants to jump in? Julie.
First, I have to say, I love it that your brother is here and your mom is here. I come from a really close family, and that's just so, so cool.
My family shows out. They're the first, when I post something on Substack, the first like 6 people who like it are always my family. It's the best.
That says a lot about your family and your parents and you. I haven't read it, and I read a lot. I love Trey, your background. It's kind of looks like part of my house, like just like thousands of books. And it's like it shows up on a lot of the greatest ever books. And I didn't even know about the movie, but I like Christopher Nolan. And it just feels like, like it was probably you who wrote that copy that said, "Don't die without reading the Odyssey." And so I'm really, really curious because of how I'll find it. And I also appreciated you saying why you picked the Rachel Wilson one, because I looked at, there's sites that gives you the same segment with, lots of different translations. And I wasn't drawn to hers. I'm drawn to some of the classic ones. I don't know, like it was Fitzgerald or somebody, Robert, somebody. I have them written down someplace.
Bagels, I think is yeah.
Yeah, Fagel is one of them. So I am curious about that. I'm also a writer and a poet, and I'm interested in that. I'm sure she has good language too, but
And that's super. And for what it's worth, if anyone wants to read a different version, you're more than welcome to. It's the same, story, but for the ease of kind of coordinating everybody, and we'll use the Wilson book. But I love that. I'm glad you're that "Don't Die Before You Read the Odyssey" is from Henry Oliver's Substack. He's writing a new book called the Reader's Quest, and that's how he opens that. And he uses Anna Karenina, and then he goes on to include like 20 other books that you should read before you die. So don't worry if you finish this session. Like there's plenty more to keep living for and reading for. But we'll get one off the list so you can rest a little easier at night. But yeah, Julie's Rosie, I'll drop the link in case anybody's interested. But for some of the sessions, I might do this and I'll send them to folks via email. But we had so many people join late, I didn't get around to it. But I often like to write like a little essay or something about like why I'm hosting something or what we're doing here, and so you can read about it. If it's of interest to you. Certainly don't do it right now, but it's available to you if you want. I will never assign you my reading as homework, FYI, but you can find it if you're interested in it.
it,
Um,
it does seem like it's the kind of book where it would really help to have a guide. You know, do you think that's true? Like some books.
Totally. So that's part of the reason that I like Intellect so much is that there's been people to guide us through different books and stories. I don't know if any of you have gone to Henry. I know I've seen Trey there at least at some of Henry Oliver's book clubs. And with Henry this year we read all of the Jane Austen novels. So there's 6, and so we just like read them, and it was so helpful to have someone like providing some context at the beginning. So what I will try and do, especially once we start reading the books, is like I will give a short synopsis. So if you didn't have time to read it, or and like we'll give some synopsis. I'll try and leave you at the end of each session with some questions to think about or things to have like on your mind as you're reading that section, so that you can kind of be aware. And then the idea here of like being the host is I will have done a little bit more homework to try and be able to answer questions that come up, and have done a little more homework to help guide a conversation. And then luckily there's 16 of us here, so everyone's gonna have, oh, I got to learn more about this, and have gone off and read something or asked ChatGPT something or whatever it is. We'll all be able to kind of help each other through the book. So it's meant to be like we have maybe one lead guide, but like 15 other guides who are here to help us through the story as well. So looking forward to that. Who else wants to share? Jenny, please.
Yeah, I recently took a class on Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, which I really enjoyed, and there was tons of references to Homer and everything. So I was like, I really need to read this, you know. And one of the things I love most was how just I became really interested in Greek culture and Greek ways of thinking and all these concepts that we don't really have English words for. You would need like 2 paragraphs to talk about one kind of Greek word or concept, and so it made me just really more interested in where does is some of this thinking been shaped. So yes, and I also love, I'm seeing in the chat, Henry Oliver's Substack. I've been to some of his classes and they're great.
You gotta go off mute. Well, welcome, Jenny. I love that reason, and that finding the breadcrumbs in reading. Right, you start reading one thing, and you just have to go deep on another thing. I love that. Who else would like to share? Daniel.
Yeah, I'm here mostly for the companies. Shockingly, there's not a lot of people to talk to about Homeric poetry. So I just read the Iliad just prior to this. So I just finished a couple of weeks ago the Emily Wilson version, and it was a great book. But it would have been much better if I had, like, let's say, Colleen to talk to about this, right? Like, like just even one other nerd, let alone like 15 others to talk about, like, the book. Because it's just like, it's something that everybody should read, but nobody has, right? So like there's actually nobody to talk to about this. It's like, oh, I just read the part about Hector, right? And like coming home. And it's like there's nobody to talk to. Right, you're just standing there going like, "This is great!" I'm screaming in my living room, "This is great!" And nobody cares. So hopefully, you guys are my nerd clan.
Welcome. Happy to be that clan for you. That is absolutely what we're here for and what inner intellect exists for. I pitched my wife on this and just got kind of a blank stare. I pitched some of my friends on it and got the like, good for you, man. So like I needed to host a salon where I could find the people on the internet to come do this with me. So Daniel, you're in the right spot. I feel you. I feel you for sure. Marcus, I think I saw you had your hand raised as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I read this in a summer English class in college. So we read like a condensed version. So I haven't read the whole thing before. But I'm interested in like this story's place in history. So it feels like it's like the bedrock of Western canon. But it's human history is older. Like the Egyptians are much older. The Trojans and the Persians and the Asians are much older. And even like the classical Greeks who we think of, this was like myth to them. So this was already ancient when it was being written down, and it's just so interesting. Like what is still relevant, and like what feels different, what feels the same and different about these societies, and yeah, just the things that persist about human nature and human society.
I love that. I love that. And I do think that was part of it for me and Brendan. I said at the top, is like, just this is referenced all the time. Like this
Yeah.
is just it's the foundation of everything. And you will be shocked at how many times you read something in this and be like, oh, like this, I get it now. And I have a lot more to say about the themes and kind of what we're going to discover in this. That I think is still very, very relevant today and should be a lot of fun. And I will say, like, the reading the full book, I just don't think an excerpt does anything. Like, not that it can't be great or it can't be interesting, but like I was shocked when I realized that like you don't meet Odysseus in this book until book 5. Like he's talked about, but you don't meet the main character until book 5. And then it's like he goes on this crazy journey, right? And it's all this, but like halfway through the book, he's returned to Ithaca. And we still have like half the book left to go. And you're like, how can it be that we have so much left? Maybe it's a third of the book. But like the point is, when you read it in full, you really get the full arc and the themes really come alive. If the excerpts, it's hard to, I think, hold on to the themes or really or tease them apart without reading the full thing. So I'm glad you're here, Marcus, for to do the whole thing this time. Who else? Anybody who hasn't gone yet that would like to share? Travis.
Yeah, hi. Um, so I also read the Odyssey in college and really enjoyed it and kind of came away kind of with some lingering questions about some things in the book. And then Colleen, here's actually my wife, and she's been telling me about, or was telling me about the Iliad as she was reading it in this book club. And I was feeling a bit jealous. And then I saw your group, and I didn't realize there was a new translation of the Odyssey. So that made me excited, and that's why I decided to join up.
Oh, I love family affairs here. I love this. This is great. Something to talk about at the kitchen table. I dig it. Nathan, you got your hand raised.
Hey, I'm sorry I'm joining late. Um, but what strikes me, the guy who spoke just before now mentioned how this has enduring relevance and you mentioned that it's referenced a lot. But to me, what gets to me is not just that it's referenced a lot, but it's affected how people have behaved a lot. This idea, like when I was reading the introduction, what struck me when she was talking about metis, of like, this quality of being crafty and having plots, and that being both praiseworthy and a little uncomfortable. Um, it just strikes me that for Greek dynastic politics for the next 1,000 years or so, that's pretty much how things went, and also just sort of Near Eastern politics as well. And and that's a huge generalization, but there's all sorts of ways that people have used this for morals or to create. She mentions allegories, allegorical interpretations, and so on that have had a lot of impact. And it's really interesting to see the ways that those threads uh, kind of carry on down the ages through in in the Western context at least, and then that has impacts on the whole world beyond, inevitably. So it has been really interesting to get into. And I, by the way, have never read the original text, or is any version of it that wasn't like a very basic, uh, you know, elementary or middle school kind of thing.
I love that. That's great. And that is so true. The Metis one in particular, we'll get into like what that theme means and how it shows up, but it's uncomfortable at times. Like, is this really something that we're praising? At one point he like outright lies, and Athena's like, "Oh, you are just the best liar ever. That makes you great." And you're just like, "Really? That's what makes him great." And so it is uncomfortable, and it does. I love the idea of like it's not just stories people told, but like it influenced the way they behaved and the way they acted. That's a great point, Nathan. Um, we haven't heard from everybody. Anybody else want to jump in? I won't force everybody to talk, but if you want to, we'd love to hear from you. Okay. If you change your mind at any point, you want to jump in, or you have something else to go off of, like, feel free to jump on in. I think what we'll do today, because most of you read the introduction, so I'm not going to go into like tons and tons of detail about like who was Homer, or those things. Like, I really want to focus more today on the story itself and the themes to pay attention to. And I think there may be three big ones just to kind of get us started, like told through maybe three different arcs of the story: the Odyssey, the journey, the word that we used, this hard journey is about Odysseus. He's the main character. We're gonna like watch his whole journey, and he's gonna be a very interesting character. But there's also Telemachus. So next month we'll read the Telemachy, and that is the first four books are all about Telemachus, and it is a coming of this. The Odyssey is very much like a classic coming of age story. Here's this young boy, or growing into a man, dealing with the world for the first time, pushing back against his mother, trying to exert his authority, trying to kind of figure out his place in the world where his father's been gone, and there's these suitors who are in his household that he wishes weren't there. And so we're going to get kind of like a young boy's coming of age story. And then we're also going to get a really interesting look at how women were treated and perceived, and what agency they had through the story of Penelope. Penelope is Odysseus's wife, and she is referenced over and over and kind of talked a lot about like her loyalty and what it means to be loyal to a husband who's been gone for 20 years instead of remarrying. And Odysseus wants to kind of like test her, test her loyalty, but she's also very smart in her own right. Especially I think in the Wilson translation, it really comes across how kind of special she is in her own right, and we'll get to see a lot about like how this kind of tension in so many of the themes between like agency and this patriarchal society that she's in, and like how does she navigate that. And in almost all of these themes we get this juxtaposition where there's one thing about it that we modern day like really like, maybe one thing we don't like so much. There's always a tension, and you see that very much also in like the theme of hospitality. It is central to the story, Xenia, like how you treat guests and how guests behave in your home is crucial to understanding the story. So the suitors who take over Odysseus's house and are there eating all of his food and feasting at his table every night and courting his wife, assuming that he's never going to get back, they are kind of held up as like bad guests. And what happens if you're a bad guest? What do the gods do to you, essentially, for your bad behavior in this? And then like how you be a good guest when Telemachus goes out to try and learn information about how his father is doing. He goes out to learn this information, and there's very much like, how long does he have to sit at the table? How long does he have to be there before he's allowed to leave? Or he's kind of he's not behaving well as a guest. And how do people treat him? What gifts do they give him? How do they feed him? In almost every book of the 24, this theme of hospitality comes in, but there's tension again in this because there's also like Odysseus is famous for like plundering cities, and guests show up all the time who are very unwelcome and do unsavory things. And this tension of like, how do you be welcoming but not too welcoming, and like what are the standards? So there's a very like ethics driven piece of this, and there's also a like etiquette driven piece of this, and trying to tease those out and what they mean, that I found personally very interesting. Got me thinking like, well, how do I even like want to be a host in 2026? Like how do I bring more people in my household? How do I make it a warm place? What kind of people do I want to invite over besides Brennan mom here? Like what does it look like to do that for the people in my life and create that feeling? So back to Nathan's thing is like this book 3,000 years old can still influence how you act and how you show up in the world through this hospitality. There's, identity in disguise over and over. Odysseus will kind of change form. He will be, he's this strapping warrior, the best to ever do it. He's cunning, he's all these amazing things. And Athena hides him as kind of like an old man and changes him and makes him gloriously handsome to convince other people to do what he wants. And so he's always kind of shape-shifting and revealing and hiding and revealing and hiding and revealing over and over throughout the story. So we'll get into a lot of that. Then there's the like, the I think the one that most people identify with is or recognize right away is this is terrible Greek. So if anybody here speaks Greek, please don't judge me for my pronunciations. But nostos, which is homecoming. Like, what does it mean to be a wanderer and to come home, and what is that feeling? And you'll see a lot of that. Like, he's looking for peace at home, and he's got to go through such an arduous journey, so much suffering to kind of get there. And so there's a lot to be said about homecoming and what that looks like. And then someone mentioned, I'm sorry, I don't remember who at this point, like fate and like maybe it was you, Colleen, like in the gods and how these they're interacting in all of these different things. And that was honestly one of my favorite parts of the whole story. Like I started reading Edith Hamilton's mythology again and like trying to go back and be like, what is the story of Zeus? Like, who's this guy? Who's Athena? Who's Hermes? And if you find yourself lost at any point during the story, I highly recommend going back and asking like who these gods are, what they represent in the culture, because it's going to tell you so much about why they're featured in the story and what's happening, what some of the conflict the gods are having. And as I read it, I just kept thinking like how much more I would enjoy interviews before athletic events You know, and it's like, oh, I'm just glad to be here. I hope, God helps me win this, or, I won, so thank you, God, and these things. All great, but like, how much fun would it be to be like, well, I picked Poseidon and this person picked Athena, and like, it's not just the people clashing and the competitors, but in this, like, the gods are at war with each other in some ways. Like, Zeus will agree at the very beginning, where we basically open on Mount Olympus in this book. And there's like, look, I think like Odysseus has suffered enough. Like, we've kind of put this guy through a lot. He's been wandering for many, many years. He's been trapped on Calypso's island. Like, why don't we help this guy get home? And so you get some people kind of get going, but then Odysseus, pokes out the eye of the Cyclops in a brutal marring an event, and the Cyclops is Poseidon's son. And Poseidon's like, okay, Zeus says I have to let you go home, but I am going to make sure that is the most painful journey that any human has ever been on. I'm going to shipwreck you. I'm going to send you through all of these, around Charybdis and what's the other one? The six-headed monster. Oh my gosh, slipping my brain right now. Who knows what I'm talking about?
Hydra?
Scylla?
Scylla. Thank you. And so like you get this sense that like the gods are at war with each other, and yet there's still this agency that Odysseus and other people have. They still have to do things, they still have to make decisions, but the gods are really involved, and it creates, I think, like a very interesting story of how we think about agency versus fate, and how these things are kind of unraveling. And I think that then gets to one more of like the idea of what these people owe the gods and how they have to behave for them. So Odysseus is, really guided on his journey by Athena, and he keeps praying to Athena, and he gets told that he's going to make it home. But the suffering is so severe, and the journey to get there is so hard that he never seems to quite accept it. That even knowing his fate is going to be in some ways very positive, it's not enough to relieve his suffering. And the most common thing you will read in the story is he just weeps all the time. Like, for Odysseus is like the big, strong warrior man. The dude is just in tears constantly. He just cries every book. He's on the shore of Calypso's island, and Calypso's like this gorgeous goddess that he admits is much more attractive than his wife, and she's promised him immortality and all of these amazing things, and yet still every night or every morning he wakes up, he leaves her cave, and he goes and sits by the shore, and he weeps all day long until he goes back to Calypso's cave in the evening. And so the way these stories kind of unravel, and the way you get to see tension between a lot of these themes and character traits that we kind of think, at least I personally think of as kind of opposed. Oftentimes, it's really fun to see them in multiple people, and you have to grapple and kind of untangle and pull apart. And then the last one is, I definitely recommend throughout this, and I hope that you guys will all just like jump in and start talking. This one I'll probably do a little bit more talking like I am now, because I want to set the scene a little bit, but like, it's also, I would love to hear just like what personally resonates. So in the introduction, she talks about starting in media res. And I read that, and I kid you not, I was stuck on an essay for 2 months because I could not figure out how to start it. I rewrote it so many times because I'm like trying to, like, how do I explain to people how I got here? And I read that, and it means in the middle, like, start the story in the middle. We pick up the Odyssey where Odysseus has been gone for a long time. It's not like he's leaving Troy and we watch the story unfold linearly. We're starting in the middle of the story, and then through memories, he's telling us all the things that have happened later in the book. And I like started my story in the middle, and it just all flowed out. And it was like, oh man, so cool. Like reading a story from 3,000 years ago, like a literary technique from, this composition of poets, gave me something that I could use today. And so if there's something that jumps out on a personal level, not just on the kind of thematic level, would love to hear that from people as you read the story. So please do feel like you can bring those to the event. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. I just said a lot. So I apologize for that a little bit. I get so excited about the book. What Trey, you put something in here. A reason to read this is to learn all the Greek gods. Anybody want to just jump in on anything that I said or any thoughts that popped up on this before I like throw some specific questions out to the group? I just want to give anyone a chance if there's something in there, a theme that really resonated. Nathan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say about the gods that they're that Athena is really weird. And has a lot of, she's so many things at once that it kind of becomes kind of a mess. And that's I feel like, and it was interesting reading in the introduction, she said saying stuff to the effect of, well, even the Greeks themselves didn't really know what to make of her, or maybe I heard that somewhere else. But they're that her origins are murky and all that sort of thing. So and she seems to go against, be the antithesis of everything that they think about women, and so it's very interesting, but I think a little bit so basically I think some of these things are unknowable, like some of these things about these gods and this religion is they're just you, maybe archaeology can tell us things, but some of it's just not. I don't know. But
Totally.
it's good to puzzle about though.
Oh, it's so fun to puzzle about, and I think that's why, like to Trey's point, like going back to read the other books and about the Greek gods is really powerful because one of the things to kind of keep in mind about the Odyssey is the people who are reading and telling these stories would have deep knowledge of Zeus and Athena and these different pieces. Like they would mean something to them in the particular context of the time that the author doesn't go to explain to us who are unfamiliar, right? And so the more you can kind of read some of these stories of what they might be talking about or what some of the characteristics of these gods are and their relationships to each other, it's really powerful for helping understand the story. Like, why does Hermes show up at the times he does? Because he has a very specific role of like bringing people to the kingdom of the dead, to Hades, right? So like, there's different places where understanding those can be incredibly powerful. But yeah, it's also like, oh, they're not super clear stories. And just one more thing I'll add to that: there will be places where you will see references to things you know well, maybe like the Trojan horse. All these guys get hiding in the horse and they get pulled into Troy. That is not in the Iliad. The Iliad ends before that. So we don't really. I think there's maybe a reference or something to it, but there's nothing in the Iliad about so far. Colleen, you're nodding like no reference. I don't think there is one. I think it happens after the Iliad end. And so you'll see references to it about how clever Odysseus was for coming up the ploy, but the main story comes from the Aeneid, which is written like 1,000 years later by Virgil, telling the story of how Troy got sacked so that Aeneas can go out and found Rome. So it's a Rome's founding story. And so it's told differently. And then there's Greek plays and other things. So a lot of these stories are composites. Like you can't get the full story from the Odyssey. And the Odyssey isn't trying to give you necessarily like the only one story. There's like derivation after derivation after derivation. Just like you can watch like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou with George Clooney, which is like the Odyssey retold, right? But in a very different context, in a different way, with different themes of the time. And so if you're ever like stuck on a god or something like that, definitely just like take the time to like do a quick Google query or whatever AI you like to use. It definitely adds to the book. But Marcus, you get your hand raised.
Yeah, another similar theme I'm interested in here is historians and archaeologists like still debate whether the Trojan War actually happened, but I feel like for Homer and for the people he was speaking to, like this was real, right? Like it's not just a story, like they are telling the founding myth of their civilization. And like how does this story hit differently if you think Odysseus was real and maybe you're related to him in some way, and how do you relate to um you know him in that society? Like is it more like George Washington to me? I'm in America, so um yeah, and like when you read about the gods, like do you feel them in the room with you, or is it just oh, it's just a story, or how does it feel when it feels real?
I love that. And trying to like get in the shoes of the people who read it and wrote it and would be, reciting it uh, along the way. I love that. Julie, did I see your hand raised at one point?
Yeah. I didn't start taking notes, and I am wondering if you could, like, really briefly, I've got my paper now, like, just some of the main themes. You mentioned a few of them, and I would just like to hear those again really briefly.
Sure. We got homecoming,
Homecoming.
identity and disguise, hospitality, metis or cunning intelligence, fate kind of versus human agency, loyalty, justice. There's many more, but those are the some of the biggies for the Odyssey.
And are these recordings going to be available to us?
I believe so. So I'll talk to the Intellect team, but they do post recorded sessions on YouTube often, and we are recording. So
Thanks.
you betcha. Kimberly, did I see your hand go up?
Yeah, for me, it's the story. Reason with Emily is the idea that it's the humanness of it. Where I'm with a group in person, we're working on Dawn of Everything, and I just find I've never read this, just did the introduction, but I really liked how you know what defines being this person at this time, like the value of him being a thief, which I found interesting. At the same time, you're always hearing about him being a hero. So I felt like Emily is what I'm expecting a little bit from just the introduction is it's going to be almost like a little different perspective of just, taking this story. And I like the fact that she compared, I also read the translator's note too, how she compared it to previous, frankly, males, European males, and saying, you know what, just that simple example when she described Penelope's hand and chose to use the word muscular. So it wasn't trying to get away from a different perspective. And all of it, it's always the lens. What lens am I going to be reading this book in and taking this in? And I just find that very interesting because it's something that's been around, or I should say poem, for so long. So and just, how that will play out.
No, I think that's absolutely right, and it's the big difference that I recall from reading it, decade or two ago to reading Emily's version, is she doesn't repeat some of the things in the same way, like Rosy Finger Dawn. In many translations, it's the same epithet, like used over and over and over. And she purposely changes the language each time, little by little. You still know that it's like the dawn is coming and that dawn matters so much in the story, and you hear it over and over, but she adds subtle changes, and it's a very much a choice. She's giving a lens. She's trying to change how you read the book, very, very directly. And the other one that I really noticed, um, something to pay attention to as you start reading, is the way she refers to the slaves. In many translations, they refer to the slaves by like their role. So it'd be like, the nanny or the handmaiden or the swineherder or whatever it is. In this, she's much more like it's slave. I'm using slaves so that you know that this person was not, this isn't just like a job that they're doing. That this person was captured and brought here to do this. She wants you to see that they're, that slavery was such a big part of the culture and the story, as part of that. So there's little things like that certainly that are within it, and in a there's really, really wonderful programs like the Catherine Project and others, so that you'd get more of like a classic professor who could explain these differences in much more detail. But even with this, like if you read the translator's note, Kimberly, I'm glad you mentioned, is like absolutely worth reading because it does give you some of the framing of why she does things the way she does. And one of my favorite parts of this book is she gave herself a constraint to make the exact same number of lines, and that constraint to me is such a powerful constraint and way to like tell the story, as opposed to like letting herself go off and be as wordy as she wants to, or as long-winded as she wants. She has to be economical. And so you really feel that in the rhythm. It's written in iambic pentameter, so it's actually in a like poetic language, if you will, or structure, in a way that I really like. And for what it's worth, if anybody is like, feeling behind or just wants another way to do this, the Audible version is narrated by Claire Danes, and is a famous actress, and she does a really good job, and you can feel some of this rhythm in the way she recites it. So if you're reading it and want to just hear a little bit too, it's a great way to pick up on some of those things. Anyone else?
I had a thought, in
Yeah.
the in medias res thing, I think is really interesting. And one of the reasons I'm looking forward to reading this is I went on a little bit of like a literary criticism kick this year and read a couple of like very old literary criticism books, including Aristotle's Poetics, where he's like, this is what makes a good poem, or this is what makes a good tragedy. And he explicitly calls out Homer as like being good at this. And he has this like very like systematic engineering kind of take on like this is where you're supposed to start a story, and he like explicitly justifies why Homer is the best at this and why this version of starting it was the only possible one, and you shouldn't do it any other way. And so it is fun, I think, to be able to kind of fill in those other nodes in the graph as you start like, well, I've read about this thing that referenced this, and I read about this thing that referenced this, similar to I think the Greek gods. And so yeah, just that kind of came back to me now as I was thinking about like, oh yeah, like I've explicitly read about that choice in other places.
I love that. Yeah, the Odyssey is one of those things that's a bit like the Bible. Like it's been written about a lot. There are a lot of great, like very current and very old ways to read about the Odyssey and what makes it a great or jumped out to different people at different times. What's this I see about Achilles? Nathan, did you have something there?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, just that I think one of the things that jumps out at me about uh this, I mean, for a lot of people is how humanist it is, and how the emphasis is on the, like you mentioned, themes having to do with being being human, um and it's sort of, even in that, like, even though he's an imperfect guy, it's still in a kind of idealized form, where he's, very, very clever, and when he's does something bad, it's very, very bad. Or he makes a mistake, it's a very huge mistake. But he has also all these redeeming qualities. He's idealized in his hospitality and in many other things. Um, so, and I think one of the things that's made it, whereas a lot of other characters from myth are a bit more one-dimensional, and yeah, I guess I'm just saying that's one of the enduring things about it is, and I think one of the things that makes it more relatable, makes him more relatable, and I don't know if I'd argue he's more famous than Achilles, but I think you're kind of more interested to hear about his story, uh, in between when he's born and when he dies, you know? Um, so, that's just a little side thought. It's nothing huge.
Yeah, I love it. That's what we're here for. Thank you. Anybody else have anything they want to jump in with right away? Or otherwise I'll come up with a question to throw out to the group. Just want to make sure I give everyone a chance to jump in. Okay, I'm very curious. So you told me kind of the reasons that you wanted to be here. I'm curious kind of what your expectations already are. Like, what do you have expectations of what the story will be or what Odysseus is, that you're kind of bringing into the story, or particular things that, not maybe why you want to read the book, uh, why you want to read the book, but like, are there any particular stories or angles or like cultural expectations you're bringing into this that you're really particularly excited to explore, and read about?
I'll jump in. I mean, I think I said before, I've kind of been interested in this connection with how people thought about the gods and how pervasive they were and just every decision that they made in life. And I think that is kind of a new perspective on me and in reading some of this for me and reading some of this mythology that I think is kind of an interesting window into the past. And then after reading the introduction, and some people have touched on this a little bit, I'm and even just like Nathan, I think, was just talking about Achilles and what a complex character he is. But after reading the introduction, I'm thinking about even kind of trying to read about Penelope in a new light. Trying to kind of see her both in the sense of like how people would have viewed women at the time, which is kind of as a like a like they owned them basically like property. On the other hand, it sounds like Penelope, and what I'm remembering a little bit, Penelope is like pretty independent and kind of has maybe some metis herself, some of this like ability to plan ahead and be cunning and so I'm kind of that's making me think about reading the story and trying to see in what ways Odysseus is complex and what characteristics he has that are kind of like opposed to each other, right? In what ways is he a hero? In what ways is he kind of like a asshole? And similarly, Penelope, like in what ways is she like a typical woman from the time, and in what ways is she like a really canny um home, person in charge of her home and who's kind of actually maybe managing events around her more than she's been given credit for. And I think that maybe the lens that Emily Wilson puts on it and some of her specific choices might might kind of be an interesting way to read this, thinking about these characters as being complex and having attributes that are maybe at odds with each other.
Yeah, that's a great one. I love that. And Penelope is definitely canny. So the suitors come and she says that she's going to promise to pick a husband among them after she finishes making like a funeral shroud for her father-in-law, and she weaves all day every day, and then at night she unwinds it. And she's able to like fake the suitors out for 3 years. No one catches on that this thing should be done and is like getting back to the same place every time. And then she finds another way to kind of defray them and push them off and do these things. So she's definitely a part of that complexity and interesting story. It's very yeah, Stephanie.
Um, Kind of answering a little bit of the original question that you posed, but I'm a big Margaret Atwood fan, and I've read almost all her books and retained a lot of, even the ones that I read 20 years ago, I retained what happened in the stories, except for and I'm going to mispronounce it probably, Penelopiad. I retained zero from that book. And I think it's because I didn't have the Odyssey or the Iliad as a frame of reference for the story being told. And so what I'm hoping to do is after we read this, go back and reread that, having the frame in which to understand where Margaret Atwood is coming from.
Ooh, that gives me an idea of like if we like this one, maybe doing that one next. A modern retelling of the story with looking at a different character in new ways. That's a good one. And I think in one of the links that I put in the useful links, which you can go back to at any time. There's nothing in there that you have to start with or anything, but there's an interview with Emily Wilson where she picks like five of her favorite books or five books that like influenced her in doing this. And that Margaret Atwood book is one of the ones that she mentioned. I love that. Anybody else? Sophia.
Yes, hi. So I think this goes back to like the first question that you posed. And I just want to build like on top of what everyone said. Um, One of the things that I really like when I'm reading is like just learning how the characters are behaving and like applying that to my life. And just like there's so many lessons that they learn that like they kind of learn it instead of us. And so that's just something that I think would be interesting, that someone hasn't mentioned yet. Yeah.
I love that. And I hope if something like that jumps out at you, like I took this lesson from it, like I hope you'll share that with the group because I think that's a big part of it. And this is maybe more philosophical from my point is like there is a way to read this as like a classical professor, where there's like a right answer, so to speak, of like what's really happening, what's the author's intention. Like you can read books that way, and it is also just like fun to read a book and be like, man, that got me thinking about something I already believe and I already care about, or like this changed my mind about something. And this is definitely a place that you can bring that stuff. Like these books are entertainment as well as like knowledge about the world around us. They're entertainment, and there's great lessons in them for a lot of things. So, building on that point in particular, I'm just going to drop in the chat. My brother and I probably send this to each other back and forth like over and over. It's a meme that Bisa from Twitter has made very famous, but it's like here's Odysseus essentially going through the middle of Charybdis and Scylla, and it's like this will make sense to you after you read the book. This will be like who these characters are, the whirlpool and this, six-headed monster. Those people will make sense to you. But like, I just love this meme. And like we think about it all the time, like, okay, the life is excruciatingly meaningless, excruciatingly meaningful on one side. It matters so much to me, and it's so meaningless. We're all just gonna be dust before long. Like, there's so much in this book that I think you can pull from your life, or like pull into your life. Maybe is a better way to say that. So, thank you for that, Sophia. I really like that. Anyone else? Any expectations or th stories or things you're really keen to explore? Anything you want to make sure we can like tee up today of like, I cannot wait to get to this part, or I cannot wait to get this question answered? Julie.
Um, I live in Seattle, and Seattle's on on Puget Sound, and I was really fortunate a couple years ago where I bought a house on Vashon Island that was right on the water, and I really wanted to have a name. I live in Seattle and on the island, and I wanted to have a name for my house. And like, what's the name? And I would look online, and I wanted something special. And what was it? And I love the the idea of homecoming, and I found the word nostos, and it's just such a great word. And maybe I'll look it up for another time, but I have a whole etymology of it, and it has like a few different meanings, and one of it is about a person who returns home from a journey at sea, and who's gone through a lot of trials and difficulties. And so I call my place Nostos, and I found a song that's called Nostos that's on YouTube, and I'll put it in the link for you guys. It is a great song, and it's like you can't quite understand all the lyrics, because you know how sometimes with rock and roll songs, but it's really a great song. And so I have a really that's a whole other reason to read the book for me, and just that that term. And it also, another meaning, there's at least three meanings. Another meaning is the story of the journey and surviving it, and the one who survives it tells the story to people.
Absolutely. The survival of it. The survival is part of the story, and how is the journey, how has the homecoming changed you? Being a big part of that.
And I think that's part of my reason of wanting to read this book, is to get in my own and all of our journeys through life, and the challenges, and how did somebody else survive it, who is a real classic journeyer.
And I will say I read this book. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I gotta say, some days I don't feel up to the task. I am very tired, and reading the Odyssey, I'm like, this is all right. Like, we're gonna get through. Like, this is just part of the journey. We're doing all right. And it is kind of funny how you can find that inspiration from books, that little uplift. Like, I've had a pretty good couple weeks since I started reading this book. Like, I'm like, okay, we got this. It'll be fine. It's just part of the journey. So I love that, Julie. Yeah, we'll get into Nostos much more. Like I think that there is well in different as we go through different books, we'll kind of pick out some of the different themes to go a little bit deeper on each time because it will be more of a central feature for some of the different kind of quartos that we're reading, for lack of a better word. Like we'll always be reading four books together, and those four books are organized. They weren't kind of random selections by me. Like they are kind of organized around the story, and so it gives us a chance to go deep on particular themes in different sessions to kind of go there. Anyone else? John.
Hey, yeah. I guess one other thing I want to mention is like just like why humans tell stories in the first place is just something I've been thinking about, and it's gotten drawn my attention to some of these ancient foundational stories as a lens into that the kind of like the function of stories. And um yeah, like one of the basic functions is like sense making, right? And um like there are ways in which we look at these old stories and they seem like crazy and ridiculous. Um, but we have to have the context of like, well, they knew very little about the world and like they were human beings who were trying to make sense of the world. Um, and so um like yeah, I read like an essay about this, and like someone pointed out like whenever there's something new in the world, like you need storytellers to like make sense of it. So like you have a film like The Matrix in the 90s because like computers are this new thing, and like people have no idea how to make sense of it and the human relationship to it and all the possibilities. So it's like you get these almost kind of mythological tellings to just like get all of that like imagination like out there, in the culture. So just one of the things that struck me in Wilson's introduction was um, like traveling, and especially traveling by sea. It's like it's just this totally new vista, and um, like anything could happen. Like there's this idea that just you could, travel to a foreign land and no one knows anything about you're gonna find there. So on the one hand, like there's opportunity, and like hospitality is really important so that you can actually go possibly get to these places, but it's also like extremely dangerous. And um like again, like from a modern perspective, it might seem silly to be like, oh yeah, if you like travel to this island, you'll find like giant monsters. It's like obviously not, but if you think about it from their point of view, it's like, okay, like we have no idea what's beyond this boundary, and the imagination can really run wild there.
Totally. I love that. And the one of the most delible memories I have from reading Lonesome Dove years and years ago was these Irish brothers who like moved to Texas. Like they just left it. There was no expectation after they left that they'd ever like find their family again, right? That they'd ever be back in touch. I mean, letters would have even been difficult. And just thinking like, man, what it must have been like to get on the boat and like be the person on the shore waving goodbye or the person on the boat heading out and like, oh my goodness, no wonder they did, they think about these monsters and these whirlpools and Cyclops on these islands and gods and everything. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine on these little wooden ships with oars and hoping for good winds. Like, oh my goodness. Wow, what a different world. Thanks for that, John. I appreciate the contribution. Um, and thank you, Julie, for the dropping the video in here for folks to watch later. Um, Anyone else with any kind of expectations or at this point, we've got about 10, 15 minutes left if people want it. I have some like things to wrap up to set us up for tomorrow, but I want to make sure that like if you're here and you got something on your mind that we've already talked about or something you want to share with the group before we really get into reading, like the introduction is kind of a chance to hear all of your stories and get to know you a little bit so that we can kind of shape the next several sessions based on who's here and what they want to talk about. You'll have more chances in the future too, but if there's something on your mind, I want to hear it now. I see Daniel just put his hand up, and then Stephanie.
Yeah, another way to look at this instead of like looking at all the themes and stuff is that it's actually just fun. Like everybody loves like Greek gods, Like there's like and they're like surprising too, right? They're not like it's completely different than our Judeo-Christian God that's perfect. You know, these gods have flaws. They're vengeful. They're pity. They're like this. They're pitiful, actually, right? They're petty and pitiful, and they're just like they're just like things that you won't expect, right? Like you don't expect like a perfect God because like even the characters are described as godlike Achilles or godlike or wise whatever, but yet some of these characters are actually more interesting, more perfect, more high achieving whatever, right? Than these gods. So like I think like the part of it is just like like and seeing like these memes like being able to get this stuff is just fun. That's my take on it. It's not like just reading. It's like I think this is a chance so that we can read, and it's not like being in a university where you have to write like a 30-page paper immediately after. It's just like, hey, look at this. I never saw it this way before. And look, there's these gods, and they're all crazy. And they actually have jobs. Like that's one thing I found surprising, right? They were just like, oh, this guy's just a metal worker. This guy just is like kind of like like a patron god, but patron god to thieves.
Yeah.
That's their job, right? They actually have mundane jobs, like all of us, right? Which is actually kind of cool. So
Dan, I love that one. It's a great one as we get to the end of like, this is just fun. Like I was thinking today, I was like, man, if we read this for Halloween, I would definitely go as Odysseus, but then I would like change costume throughout the night. Like an old man, and then I'd be like washed up naked on the shore, and then I'd be like, hulking strong guy who just covered in blood who killed everybody. Like there's so many options. This is just a good ripping yarn.
and it's obviously fun because there's gonna be a whole movie made about it, right? Like if there's like if it wasn't fun, it wasn't dramatic, and didn't have all these great characters, we couldn't have like a full length like motion movie.
Totally. I love that. Stephanie, jump in.
One thing that I thought was really interesting from the introduction was the discussion of the Homeric questions and, who wrote it, how was it written, when was it written? And I thought all of that was really interesting. And I can't imagine that we'll have much discussion of that because it seems really scholarly, probably not for the setting, but I thought that was really interesting and cool.
Oh, absolutely. And, I should respond to Daniel and respond to you on the same thing. If you want to write a 30-page paper about any of these things, I will read it. It is not assigned, but I will read the thing if you write it after all this. So feel free to write an essay on Substack, 2 pages or 30 pages. I'm all in. And I do think that Stephanie, you're exactly right. There's some things like this book has been written about so much. There's so much detail. We will not even scratch the surface of what we could do. As robust this will be over 8 sessions. Like I explained, I was doing Odyssey over 8 sessions. Somebody like, what? 8 sessions? Why? It's like because that's how long it's going to take just to like tell the story and like get into it. So there's definitely pieces like that. And Stephanie, if there's something that super interests you, feel free to bring it up, and we'll make a Discord channel. Like throw something that you're curious about or you want to know, or that you learned through some of your side research. Throw it in there. We'll look forward to hearing about it.
I
Julie.
did
Yes.
check out a million books. Oh, I'm sorry. I checked out a bunch of like critical works from the library. I don't know if I'll actually read any of it, but if anything cool comes up, I'll mention it to the group.
This would be my dream. We hook you in, and everyone's like, "Let's go read another book. Let's go read Margaret Atwood. Let's keep this journey going. We're gonna go through ancient Greece together. We're going through the Aeneid, and just keep rocking and rolling." So I love that. I hope you will let us know what you're discovering as you go, Stephanie, and Daniel, and then Julie.
Yes, Stephanie, we're all nerds. We're here for you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what this group is for. I tried to bring you together. I'm like, there are people who are into this. I know that there are people who want to do this with me, and look at all the people that showed up. So I love that. Julie.
I wanted to ask, sorry, I've got a bit of a cold. For people who might be listening to it, is it the kind of thing, I don't listen to many audiobooks, but like, can you follow it enough with just listening to it? And just wondering if people have played around with that.
Who wants to jump in? Trey.
I'll answer that because I did the Iliad where I didn't have enough time. Um, and so I just did the audio book on like super high speed. And My goodness. Did I heard the words, I knew what the words meant, but did I put anything together? Absolutely not. However, again, that was high speed. But I will say if you have an iPhone, iPad, or one of the Kindle Fires, I think you can, if you use the audiobook that's linked, buy that audiobook and then buy the ebook that's linked to it. They'll sync up and you can actually have it read, the app will read it to you while it highlights the words as it's reading or the line while it's reading. And I highly recommend that. Um, that keeps me on track. And I mean, it's been very successful with me because when I try to read these books, my biggest problem, and this goes with Henry Oliver's Shakespeare book club, is the language. It's just different and it throws me off. Some people like love it and have no problem. I have a problem, but when it's reading back to me and I see the words as the audio's going, that's been by far the biggest winner, and I can't recommend it enough.
Thanks, Trey. Daniel, you want to jump in too?
Cool.
Yeah, so like I said, I just read the Iliad and also the Emily Wilson version. And I find that the way she writes, and when you listen to it, and because it is an oral tradition, right? This poem was passed on from like person to person in an oral way. The way that she has her meter set up and her constraint makes you feel the rhythm of the poem, right? So in that way, like listening to it was actually easier than reading it, unless you can actually do in your head that you're going to read in this meter, right? So like in some ways, it's easier to listen to it. But I did both. I would actually read it first and then go back to the audio version and listen to the same section. So I'll do like a couple of books at a time and then go back and listen to it.
On that note, what I would say is the Claire Danes narrated version that I mentioned is very easy to follow. The language is not Emily Wilson's language is not super complicated, and so it is quite easy, I think, to follow the story. And my recommendation might be like, don't try and sync the listening with the reading. Listen all the way through to get like familiar with the story and the arc and what's happening and what's going on without feeling like you have to catch every line or every detail, but just like get through the story. I think it's like the introduction alone is like 3 hours on that, but like the actual books are quite short. Like you get through them pretty quickly. The actual book is maybe like 10 hours of listening, I think, somewhere in that range. And so I think like if you're doing dishes or you're driving in the car or whatever, I found that very effective. And then I had some grounding in the story that when I went back to the book and started reading it, like I kind of knew it was happening. I could pay attention to other things, or I could think a little harder because I wasn't just trying to follow along with like who these people are, what's happening. Again, everyone's gonna like have different ways that works for them, but I do think that it being the oral tradition in a poem, like the audio version is particularly good in this situation.
That's really, really helpful. Thanks, everybody.
Mhm. Did I see another hand go up? Anybody?
It was up and then down, but I put it in chat. Another thing that really helped me with like Shakespeare and similar works was listening to a YouTube audio's summary, brief. Brief was all I ever needed. And when I had an idea of what was coming, I would naturally pay attention to it, and it was naturally framed for me to pick it up. Um, and it was night and day different. Like as far as retention, able to enjoy the Shakespeare play, as opposed to like reading it and having no clue what's going on. But there's so many options. Just bounce around with the options till you find like that one that works for you.
And Hannah's not visible right now, but she just put in there that Emily Wilson herself did little bits on YouTube in costume, and that they're quite funny. So we definitely need to find those and be able to watch. I will. That is great content. I can't wait for that. Okay, we're getting down to the very end. I'll do some wrap up here real quick. Did anybody have anything they want to add before we wrap up? Okay.
Yeah, where's the schedule, the calendar dates?
So, great question. So, if you go to the Interintellect page, there you can kind of search in two different ways. There's a landing page for this Super Salon that's kind of like maps, or it's not Super Salon, for the series, and it will show you kind of all eight in order what the readings are. For many of them, I put like a supplementary reading. So if you're like Stephanie and you want to go ham on like the secondary sources, like I put some things in there to be like, here's what's like widely considered interesting or good. So like you have something to jump off of if you want to. I will never presume that you have read that. I will presume that you've read the book, or like you've read the four books for each one. We'll do some summary and stuff like that, but you should still come if you haven't had the chance to read them. But like, well, the presumption will be that we've read them. We won't summarize in great detail, and then there's some of the secondary. So you can go there. That there's a landing page. There's also individual pages for each session. Each, I think they call it episodes on Interintellect. So you can see episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like we sold out. So like if you this is fun, like definitely go sign up now to hold your place. The way that Interintellect works is I've made it so that there's 20 spots. And the reason I capped it at 20 spots is because I wanted to be able to do this where we could hear from everybody. And so I think we heard from almost everybody in the session today. And I'd like to maintain that as much as possible so that it feels like a discussion. We're getting to know each other and doing all that. So that said, the way that Interact works is like I did not make this members only. I opened it to everybody. So there are only 10 member spots available for free. If you do not get one of the 10 member spots, there is a ticket price for the other slots. So the member slots will fill up, but you can still buy a ticket. And if you're at this first one and it sells out, there's 20 tickets, like send me an email and I will like try and figure out a way to get you here because I want this. I would as much as possible like to see the same people all 8 sessions so that we're like building on it together and presuming some level of knowledge together. So please do go sign up and join for that. It means a lot to me that you're here. Like I do this for fun. But it is a lot of work and it's just like it's fun to see people excited about it. So just like thank you for coming and being a part of it. Um, and then getting into the next one. So the way that I've set this up is we will meet on the second Thursday of every month. And I did that because like it was kind of the best way to avoid holidays and some of those other things. So we'll meet on the second Thursday of every month. We'll always read 4 books at a time, and the next session is the Telemachy. That's what it's referred to. It's the first 4 stories that are about Telemachus, kind of setting the scene for what's happening at his home, where we learn kind of the dire situation that they are in, and unsure of whether Odysseus is alive or dead and what they should do about it. And Telemachus is going to go off to try and learn more information. We're going to follow him on his adventures for 4 books. And then in February, we will meet Odysseus for the first time and get to know what the kind of harrowing journey that he has been on for many, many years. And so we'll just keep doing that, 4 books at a time, the first Thursday of every month through June. In June, we will wrap up the book. We'll be done. We'll have read the whole thing. On July 17th, the Nolan movie comes out. Everyone should go see it. I think it should be awesome. And then we will do a wrap up for the 8th episode. And we'll as we get closer, we'll figure out kind of what we want to do with that. I hopefully we'll get some sense of like what people thought and how people are thinking about the book. And then but we'll also have the movie then to do a little compare contrast fun along the way. So anyway, thank you for coming. I had a great time this evening and it was very exciting. Thank you for everybody from like different time zones. We got Ms. Gupta over there from Delhi calling in at like 8 in the morning to join us. I know we got people late and early, so thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate it, and I very much look forward to reading the Odyssey with you all.
Thanks, man. This is great.